$500 billion of data value was made from large tech companies in 2020. The end consumer really seems to be getting cut out of this, right? It's all of our data that's feeding all of these decisions that are making these companies billions and billions of dollars that are rewarding their shareholders. But the regular person is kind of just being cut out. And data has only gotten more valuable over the last couple of years. So there was a two-pronged thing of like, well, everyone's data has value. So why doesn't everyone get value back for their data? So our thought process is, well, can we layer on a product that gives everyone value? There's not a single person that gets left behind. And one person's browsing data isn't worth more than another person's browsing data. Everyone just gets compensated equally and fairly. And what would a future look like that of the internet? So that's kind of where it really got started.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the life stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan. Before we get into today's conversation with Aanikh Kler, there's a couple things that we need to go over first. If you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to leave us a positive rating and review. Share this episode with a friend and subscribe to the show. Put up brand new interviews every single Monday, and a brand new Takeaways episode is an audio exclusive where I sit down and break down the most recent podcast episode of the week every single Thursday. And now, without further ado, I'm very excited to present to you my conversation with Aanikh Kler. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan. Today on the show, we are joined by Aanikh Kler. Aanikh is the COO and co-founder of Trufan, investor in FaZe Clan, a former member of Canada's 20 Under 20, and one of the youngest entrepreneurs in the history of Dragon's Den, Canada's version of Shark Tank, to receive funding. I'm very excited to have him here on the podcast today. Aanikh, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jacob. That was some premium gas, man. That was very kind of you.
I appreciate that, man. And where I want to start today, I don't even want to start with business. I want to go back to the beginning and I want to talk about family because I know family is super important to you. And from my understanding, your family immigrated to Canada in 1908, right?
Yes, they did.
Yeah. And so talk to me about and another thing too with your family, correct me if I'm wrong, but every single person is traditionally educated, right? Master's degrees, I believe.
Yes. If I look at my mom and all of her siblings, and she has 4 siblings, they all have master's degrees. Yes, I can confirm that 100%.
That's wild. And so you spent a lot of time, like all 4. So everyone lived in Vancouver when you were growing up, right? So you spent a lot of time with the whole family?
Yeah, pretty much everyone lived in Vancouver. My one older cousin and his mom, they lived in Sacramento. So I saw them a little bit less than my other cousins, but they would come down like majority of the summers and we'd all hang out.
Yeah. And so 9 first cousins, I believe, and you spent a lot of weekends at your grandparents?
10. Wait, no, you're right. 9. Because I'm thinking there's 11 of us and I have a brother. So then I have to minus myself and my brother. So then, yeah, there's 9 first cousins. Yes.
So talk to me about what that's like. So for context, I'm trying to think of how many first cousins I have. I have 4 first cousins, but I didn't live close to any of them. So it's I'd see them every once in a while. So what is that like growing up with so much of your family in one spot where you can spend so much time together?
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. Honestly, it's super beautiful. I feel extremely blessed about it. I'm square in the middle. So I have 3 older cousins. One right now is doing internal medicine residency. The other one's a lawyer, and the other one's a nurse. And the closest one of them in age to me is about, 3 to 4 years older, like 3.5 years older. And then the closest on my youngest side is my younger brother, who's 3 years and 8 months younger than me. So I was kind of not necessarily the awkward middle child, but I was kind of stuck in the middle. So growing up, I always wanted to hang out with my older cousins. And then when they went off to university and were doing their things, I got really, really tight with all my younger cousins. So I actually feel maybe when I was younger, I kind of didn't like being the middle, but now I actually really appreciate it because I have strong bonds with, both groups of cousins.
Yeah, you're kind of unique on your own little island there with that even gap on either side. Was there any instances when you were growing up where you want to sit at the quote unquote the big kid table or the adult table, but because you're in that weird middle ground, you're sitting at the little kid table while your older cousins are at a different table?
Yeah, I'd say there were some instances like that. I think not necessarily whether I forced myself to be more mature early on or it just kind of happened because of, I guess I was spending time. I always wanted to hang out with my older cousins. I always wanted to because, when you're let's say, 7 or 8 or 9, um, and your brother's like 3 or 4, is like, it's harder to relate, but you can relate to like a 13-year-old, right? Like you can talk about Disney Channel shows or superhero movies that are coming out. So I always felt like I tried to be more mature so I could hang out with them, and obviously sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
And so how does that kind of manifest today, being so close with your family growing up? Like obviously that's
Yeah.
still a big part of your life today, no?
100%. Yeah, it's a huge part. Like this summer, I went to kind of the island with 3 of my cousins, plus my brother and my friend and my girlfriend, and like that was really awesome. Like, you know, during all the Euro Cup games this summer, I would watch them with my younger cousin because he was super obsessed. His younger brother is really, really into basketball, so we talk basketball. I just came back from a wedding in Calgary where I spent 2.5 nights with, 4 of my first cousins staying at my other uncle's house in Calgary. So family is definitely a really, really big part of my life. And, you know, I can't even tell you the amount of second cousins or third cousins that our family has. It's actually insane. But now family plays a really huge role, and we're all really supportive. And I think as all of us have grown up, we've kind of tried to clue in on the importance of it as well. And as first cousins, put more of an emphasis on like seeing each other, spending time, going out for dinners, asking how everyone's doing. I think specifically in the last year, it's become a lot more important to kind of my cohort of first cousins, and I think that's been great.
No, absolutely. And there's one other thing I wanted to ask you about too from growing up. And I read a quote, I think it might have been in McLean. So again, we don't have to talk about this if you don't want to. But it was as a kid, Aanikh always kept his hands in his pockets. And so I'm probably going to get this word wrong, but is it ectrodactyli?
Yeah, it's something like that. To be honest, I'll I my girlfriend and my family who is her in the medical fields know much better than me. But yeah, so like I obviously I grew up, and I have my hands look very different. So my left hand looks pretty normal. Like if you were walking, you wouldn't really be able to tell, but I'm missing a finger. And then my right hand is like very, very unique looking. And you would probably be able to tell. And no, I definitely remember growing up and going to you know I was always very comfortable around people I was comfortable with. So, for example, at school, you know, after the first day or two, I was fine. No one really noticed. No one really brought it up. Or if they brought it up, I was happy to talk about it. I was never worried about talking about it. I just didn't like how awkward other people acted when they saw it and weren't comfortable enough to ask me about it. Like the overall air of like they're looking, but they don't know what to say, and they don't know really if they should say something or not. I hated that. I was just like, hey, if like, my whole life, if you want to ask what it is, I'm very comfortable talking about it. But yeah, so for a lot of new social interactions, I would just put my hands in my pockets because I didn't want to have that air of, weirdness, so to speak. But I think I really outgrew that like by 12, 13, 14. I really credit sports, I think, because I was just so heavily involved in like soccer, basketball, field hockey, whatever it was. And I was playing it, and you just meet so many people, you play against so many people that like you don't really care. And it comes to the point that like I was just very comfortable with who I was. But definitely growing up, like I can remember very distinctly from like 6 years or maybe 5 years old to about 9, it being more prevalent. And then, 10, 11, kind of, and then, 12 and beyond, I just stopped caring.
And with, you mentioned sports there, with sports specific, was that a pretty high level, right? Like you turned down a spot on Canada's national junior team for field hockey?
Yeah, I was super fortunate. I got into field hockey because my older cousin, she played field hockey, and she was like, "Oh, like you'd love it, like you'd have a really fun time." And I was like, "Okay, cool, like I'm down." Like I had kind of stopped playing soccer at a really high level, and I was really just playing school sports, like school basketball for the basketball team. So I started playing, and I really liked it, and I had really great coaches, and my teammates now have represented Canada on a bunch of different stages. People I played against are on the Olympic team. And then, yeah, when I played on the provincial team when I was 13, 14, and 15, 13 when I was a reserve, and then 14 and 15 as a starter. And actually, when I was 15, I was the captain of the team. And then, yeah, when I was 16, we had junior national tryouts. And it was kind of like, I had been offered a spot, and it was kind of like it was a massive time commitment. And at the same time was right around that, it was post Dragon's Den. I was really trying to get involved in that sort of stuff, and I just didn't make the decision. And I'm very appreciative of my coaches who extended me, a spot at that time. And a lot of my friends went on and have done really, really incredible stuff for the team. Represented Canada at Pan Am's or Olympics and all that stuff. So It was super fun. I definitely, oftentimes I'll drive by fields in Vancouver that I played at and I'll think about it and I'm like, damn, I really miss playing, but I'd now be a very, very washed 23-year-old. So I don't know how good I'd be.
And is there any lessons or anything you learned through sports growing up that still stick with you? Because I feel like sports are so foundational to a kid when they're growing up. Like, is there anything that
Yeah.
still sticks with you?
I think like the one thing that I probably don't follow enough is like trust your gut. Like in sports is one of those things where it's like things become so muscle memory, right? Like, the fact, like, Steph Curry, right? Like, he doesn't think when he shoots a three, right? It's just so fluid and silky. And I wasn't Steph Curry by any means or any stretch of the imagination. But, that idea of like when you're playing, you've done things so well that sometimes the best plays come when you don't think, you kind of just act. It's almost instinctual. And I find that sometimes in business, there's so many factors coming in that you're analyzing everything, you're looking at everything, you're thinking it could go this way, it could go that way. And sometimes you don't trust that gut feeling that's just like you should do it or you shouldn't do it. And you overanalyze and it takes up a lot of time. And sometimes you get the right decision, sometimes you get the wrong one. And that's similar in sports. But I feel like in sports, you make that decision so quickly that even if it's the wrong decision, you can recover very quickly. Versus sometimes I find in business, you take so long to make the decision. And if you make the wrong decision, you've invested so much time into it that it's harder to recover. So I feel like, just like sometimes sending it and like trusting your gut is something that I wish I did more in like life outside of sports.
That's very interesting because I've asked a lot of people that question because so many people have played sports growing up and no one's ever, like, usually you get like discipline or the importance of teamwork and things like that. So I've never heard anybody look at it from that angle. And so what do you think needs to happen for you to be able to start trusting your gut a little bit more now?
I feel like I need to be less worried about consequences. And I will put a disclaimer. This isn't like I should just, like do something crazy or like, say something really rude, but it's like, hey, I think this could be an interesting, investment opportunity, right? I think it's good. My gut feels like it's smart. But then my analytical side goes, no, let me read a couple more articles. Let me research a few more things. Let me ask a friend who I know is really in this space. And it's finding that balance of like, yes, do your research. Yes, put some thought, put some time into it. But other times it's just like, trust your gut. I know I've seen you a little bit on it on Twitter, but like I've loved crypto. I've been into it for a really long time. I have very mixed feelings about certain aspects of it. But recently I got into NFTs, and yesterday on the first, Ethereum spiked and a lot of people were flash selling their stuff. And I kind of was like, I don't know, like maybe I should wait, like maybe I should read a little bit more about this project. And, and for better or for worse, again, I think everything happens for a reason, but like a couple of projects that we're looking at now are up from last night when I was thinking about buying them, are already up like 60-70% because people are realizing that yesterday people were just going insane. So that's like I think the reason that I thought of that was because I was reflecting on that this morning as well. And I felt when you brought up the sports example, I'm like, oh, wow, like that's actually something I should really tie it back to.
Yeah. And I think it's a good point that you said, like, too, you're not doing anything crazy, and like you're trusting your gut. But when it comes to trusting your gut and looking at it from the sports angle, you're going to trust your gut with things you've done so many times. You put the reps in, and so you have kind of that muscle memory to be able to go and do it. And it's a similar thing in business, right? Like you've been doing it, you've done the reps, so you can kind of identify things just naturally, subconsciously, where your gut comes into place. I think it's a really important thing. Is you're not just going to go start doing crazy shit. Like you're not going to go try and free climb a mountain or something just because
Yeah.
you know what I mean. Like it's trusting your gut in circumstances related to where you've been putting the reps in. Essentially,
yeah, that's a great way of putting it, Jacob. That's actually a phenomenal. That's way better than I put it.
Oh, thank you. And there's actually, now while we're on the topic of NFTs, like you said, I've been tweeting a little bit about it, and it's almost been like, I don't know if learning in public's the right way, but I feel like I learn best when I try and summarize what I'm learning. So now when I read a blog, I try and summarize it in a couple paragraphs and like a note. And that's part of the reason why I'm tweeting it. So what are like, because I think it was recently you tweeted like you never used to understand NFTs until only recently. So like, what was that switch for you where you started to understand?
Yeah, I have a very interesting back and forth with crypto. So when I was in 2013, I did a summer camp at Stanford, and these two kids who I met, we were hanging out and we were in Palo Alto, and we went to an Apple store, and they made me, well, they didn't make me, sorry. It's not like they like put a gun to my head. They told me about this thing called Bitcoin in 2013. And we signed into every Mac laptop or computer there that was a demo one. And started mining this dude's account in the background on these computers. And he said that, every night it resets because they turn the computers off or whatever. But, you can get like, he's like, you make like $7. And we're like, oh shit. Like we were like 2013. How old was I? I was like 14, 15. I'm like, this is so cool. Like, because I had always liked investing in stocks. So I'm like, this is a very interesting world. Long story short, went back to high school, barely ever talked about blockchain or crypto and focused on school. And then after my first year of Stanford, I was looking for internships and I got to work at a phenomenal, exciting company in Vancouver called Axiom Zen. And they weren't in crypto, they were doing other projects. And then that summer, this was the 2016 summer. This is the summer of ICOs. This is the summer of all that craziness. They started working on a project called Crypto Kitties, which was actually one of the first NFTs. I won't say it's the first because I know that there's some other projects that came around maybe before that. But I think it was the first mainstream one. Like when it launched, it broke the Ethereum network. They had record sales of, one selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I got to work there while they were making it. Like I got to be a part of conversations of the genesis of CryptoKitties. Now I was an intern, so it's not like I was driving the project in one direction or the other, but they as a company were very open to people giving thoughts and ideas. I spent a month looking at building a stable coin and comparing Tether, which was, now it's been renamed to like USDT or something, with like how the international, the IIF, whatever, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, how they have like their own stable currency, which is backed by a bunch of other ones. Like I remember spending months researching it. I never bought any cryptocurrency myself. I never did. When it spiked, I was like, okay, whatever. I think it's hype. And then it dropped. And then I bought a bit of Ethereum. And then I always thought NFTs didn't make sense. I know I'm rambling for a really long time, so I apologize. But I never really got it until I actually said, you know what? Like I see a lot of people getting into it. I see a lot of my friends getting into it. Let me just put some money into it. And if I lose it all, it's fine. It's going to be a great learning lesson. And if I don't, then, that's great too. I'll learn and I don't lose all my money. And when I started getting into it, I realized that the community is really cool. The people involved are really interesting. And at the end of the day, it's just it's really just opening up art to be a lot more accessible, which to me is really cool. Is like, I don't know any young person my age or around my age that spends money on art. Like maybe you'll go and you'll buy a signed jersey of your favorite athlete and you'll put it up in your wall in your house. But that's like the most. People aren't going and buying paintings for thousands of dollars. And I felt like NFTs were just a really gamified version of purchasing art. And obviously some have utility. I'm very bearish on the whole, every NFT project is building a metaverse game that you can play and do this. Like I love video games. And as you said, I invested in FaZe. Like building a good game is really hard. It's not easy. So I'm a little bit like, I don't believe every project is going to have some AAA quality game, but I do believe in like the artistic value of these items. And again, I agree with what a lot of people who are way more smart in the industry say is like, 2 years from now, a lot of projects are going to be worth nothing, but a lot are going to be worth a lot. And it's just finding projects that you resonate with. And at the end of the day, I remember reading someone's tweet quote that was like, if you buy it and you like the art, if it goes to nothing, it doesn't matter because you like the art anyways. So that's kind of my long-winded story of how I have gotten into it and been spending a lot of time in the space.
Yeah. And so what are some of your criteria for looking at it beyond just liking the art? Like what else do you look for in an NFT? Because like I found I haven't purchased any either. I haven't even purchased crypto yet. It's something I'm just trying to work on investing more now. So I'm just curious what you look for in an NFT.
Yeah. Take this with all the grains of salt.
Yeah. And of course, this is not investment advice.
This is not investment advice.
Purposes only.
Exactly. I think obviously like it's, you could say it's the same as a startup, like who's the team, right? And a lot of these people aren't well known, but like, for example, the largest in terms of the assets, actually the largest investment I made is again, I'm not trying to shill a project. I'm just giving it as an example. They're called Gauntlets and they're by an artist called Boss Logic. And I had heard of Boss Logic before I even got into NFTs because he designs the Marvel and DC movie posters. So I love Marvel. I love Spider-Man's my favorite superhero. My PC has an LED screen and it has Miles Morales, like a GIF on it. Like, so I just thought it resonated really well with me, like the art, because it was all based on like Infinity Gauntlets-esque type artistic work. And he as an artist is really well known. Like he has 2 million followers on Instagram. So, my thought process is that if we're early in the NFT world, as more people come into it, the two things they're going to look for are reputable names and art that they can align themselves with. And my thought process was, hey, well, he's quite popular and I like his art anyways, and it's pop culture related. You know, don't get me wrong, like Bored Ape Club has done phenomenal and they're worth like, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but like people don't really align themselves too much with a picture of a monkey, right? But people align themselves to Captain America and Black Widow and, Captain Marvel and Spider-Man. And, when people are new, I think they'll align themselves to that. And because people love pop culture. So that was why I thought the project would be really cool. And, it's been interesting, like how it's gone, but overall I'm pretty happy with it. And at the end of the day, I really like the artwork and the community is cool. So I'm happy with it. But that was one thing I focused on was like, what does the appeal of this look like 2-3 years from now? I'm not trying to be in NFTs to like buy one and then flip it next week. And if I didn't 100x my money, I'm gonna be pissed off. Like I don't think that's solid investing at any means. It's like you could say the same thing of like flipping penny stocks. It's like what would I be happy a year from now if I held it? That's kind of how I try to look at the projects. And if I don't feel confident about that, I usually don't invest or buy.
What's your thought on around gas wars? Because like I've found one NFT that I want to get into, but like I got in right when it was like, okay, this is a pretty solid community. Like I think there'll be enough here. Like I'll buy a couple, maybe there'll be some resale value, but I also believe in the project for a number of different reasons. But now like the community is just insane. So like I'm worried about like throwing $1,000 into gas and still not getting through, and then just losing $1,000 to nothing. It's like, what is your approach? Like, how do you kind of approach it when it comes to a gas war?
Yeah, honestly, I have gotten really lucky where I'd say that I haven't been involved in one. Like the Gauntlets one was the cleanest level. Like I've been a part of another project called Dogs Unchained, and I think they're actually a really good case study. They get thrown out a lot, where they sent out these things called proof of stakes, which for all their early adopters, and you could buy and sell that, and that guaranteed you to mint one, and you don't have to pay gas. Then they had another one where they whitelisted a bunch of wallets. So if you had been following them on Twitter or a part of their Discord before a certain point, they would DM you, or they put out a tweet saying DM them your wallet address and they'll whitelist you one reservation. You don't have to pay any gas. So that was a really, really, really cool project because, a lot of early adopters and supporters didn't pay any gas for one or two, right? Again, if you wanted to mint 10, then you were probably paying a lot of gas. But, for one or two, I only did one, the one that I had the reservation for, and I didn't pay any gas. And that was great. I thought that was a really, really cool example of like, a company trying to be smart. And like the Boss Logics one, I bought it on a Sunday morning. So like there weren't really any NFT projects dropping. So that was quite low. There's definitely some projects coming up that I'm like slightly interested in that I have a strong feeling gas is going to be crazy. There's this one which has just went insane. It's like Mecha something or Mecha Universe or whatever. And they had like 25,000 people join their Discord in the first hour that they announced it. And I'm like, you're going to pay 3 Ethereum just to mint one of those things. Like I don't know if it's worth it or not. Like it's just crazy. And obviously like Solana, which is the other kind of up and coming competitor to Ethereum, which has no gas, it's actually done great. And I think it's really smart, but the projects that have been launched on it have just had a lot of other unfortunate errors that I think it hasn't picked up the steam that it probably deserves as a technology. It's still very young in its infancy, but I think gas is really shitty, to be completely honest. Like it's tough because it really prohibits people who are interested in projects and are new without a large Ethereum bank account to support them to get into projects that they legitimately really like. Like, if you have to pay 0.5 Ethereum to get into a mint, not everyone has, 2,000, 2,300 Canadian just to throw, and then to potentially say, I might not even get that back, right? Like that's pretty crazy. So I think we'll obviously see some innovation in the space over the next little bit. And, I still think anyone getting into it right now and reading about it now is early, right? Like similar thing with, people in 2016 that, when it spiked to like, Bitcoin spiked to like 15K and people were like, oh, I'm too late now. And then it dropped. It's like, No, like if you had bought Bitcoin in 2017 when it dropped down to like 5,000, 6,000, you'd be doing very well right now. So that's my philosophy with NFTs is like for the most part, anyone that's getting involved in it right now in the long run will do well. I'm not saying everyone's going to 100x their money, or 1,000x their money like, they did on like CryptoPunks or whatever. But, I think for the most part, it's, anyone getting in now is going to be okay.
No, 100%. Even when it comes to investing, again, not investment advice. This is just for entertainment purposes, but it's like, it's focused on like the more secure stuff. Like it's probably better for you to focus on trying to just do some safe investments as opposed to just hoping for 100x at some
Yeah,
point. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like, so that's just, that's kind of my approach to it. Cause yeah, the gas thing sucks. Like I'm okay to lose money on an NFT, but I'm not okay to lose money because I am like going into a blind bid essentially where I lose my money if I don't bid enough, right? Like it's like a silent auction, but every bid you lose money. But anyways, we'll digress. Enough NFTs for now. Although I was going to get back on track here. One thing I know, kind of jumping back to your childhood, is your mom was a big believer on learning through travel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
And so I know you went on a couple different trips, Egypt, Turkey, but the obviously the pivotal one was Cambodia, right? When you were around 13, 14.
Yeah.
And so can you tell, because I want to get into Dragon's Den and Under the Radar and everything. So can you kind of tell the story that really kicks that whole off with that little girl that came running up to you and your family?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually have like, it's funny. I haven't talked about the story in a really long time, and it's like I have very vivid memories of it. So yeah, no, my mom very, very heavy on, experiential learning, you know, pick us up, ship us off. Just kidding. We all went together, but to different really cool places. Experience culture, heritage, like I've seen the pyramids and like that's so cool. You know what I mean? Like specifically when you think of the last 2 years and no one's been able to travel to like look back and be like, holy shit, I did all this traveling before I was this age. It's like I feel extremely, extremely blessed. But yeah, we were in Cambodia and we were walking around Angkor Wat, which is like I think it's an ancient wonder of the world. It's these beautiful, beautiful temples. It's where they filmed the Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider movie. So like it's a real place. And we were just walking, me and my family. So like me, my brother, my mom, and our extended family who were there, who were from Thailand. And this girl just like ran up to us and like started like joking with like my younger brother and like I guess like my younger cousin, family friend, um, and just like was really funny and really clever and really smart. And then like kind of worked like her way up to like like she knew that like she had to like get them excited about it, but they weren't like the purchasing decision maker. So like then she would like egg them on to go talk to like our parents, who were then obviously like the drivers of the purchase. And then like obviously she was like a young girl, like obviously coming from a very, very difficult background. So I think we ended up buying a bunch of bracelets that she was selling, but just like really cool. Like she was very forward and intelligent and charismatic and you know like not overly pushy as well, like kind of knew when to like knew the social cues and the social dynamics of it all. So yeah, that was a really interesting moment. And it was just in that moment that I was kind of sitting here and I'm like, damn, like this girl probably learned all of this on her own, watching people and, you know, trial through failure. It's not like, she has access to, lots and lots of reading material or the internet to watch videos or, has a network that she can ask, her parents or her aunts and uncles to introduce her to someone who's really good at sales. Like this is all just straight up, learning from really no other choice. And it was that moment that I was like, education is really, really important, right? Like I think it's a basic human right that everyone should have access to, a high school education. To me, like, it's so, so important. And yeah, that's really what just inspired me. I'm like, I want to do something about this, and I don't want to do it just by raising money, because I think that, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, because I donate a lot of money to charities, like as I know many, many people do. But I wanted to just try something different. I wanted to say, I know a lot of people that do fundraisers and stuff. Is there a way I can do it maybe slightly differently that, maybe puts more onus on people to maybe have, them wanting to do it themselves? And that's why I came up with the app and why I came up with, the download and 20 cents to feed the children. And I went and, did my work in India. It's just because I thought that was my unique version or way of trying to make a difference. And I don't know if it was better or worse. Honestly, I really don't know. But it was just what I thought would be, the best path for me at the time.
Yeah, 100%. So originally, so when you get back from Cambodia, you want to do something, but you don't exactly know what it is, right? And I think it was someone's phone went off in math class, and that's kind of where the idea for Under the Radar started going.
Yeah, yeah. It was a very interesting sequence of like a week to 2 weeks. Like I was like in like seventh grade, and like they were like everyone had just getting like iPhones or Blackberries or whatever. And people's phones were going off and they were texting, like this is grade 7, you're like 13, 14, like, you're starting to talk to girls, and, like guys are texting and all this type of stuff. And that happened. And then I was at home and I was reading a book, and the book was like interesting. It was like an interesting fact book. And it talked about this grocery store in England, or this convenience store in England, that would play this really high frequency sound so that young people wouldn't loiter around the convenience store, and older people wouldn't notice it. So I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like there's this thing that like old people can't hear, but young people can hear. Like it blew my mind. I'm like, how is that possible? Like when people talk or when noises are made, everyone hears it, unless you're like, you're really, really hard of hearing. So then I looked into it and I was just like, oh, like this seems like it could be relatively applicable. I wanted to do something. It's aiming at young people, and that's kind of just like one thing led to another, and I just started working on it.
And at the time, so you built this app. I know you had a coding mentor, but you didn't have any coding know-how at the time, right? Like you kind of learned from scratch to build this.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of it was just trial and error. Like I don't know what, it took me like 9 months to build this thing, which any competent engineer could probably build in like a week, a week to 2 weeks probably. So by no means was it polished. And this is what, 2014. This is even early. Making apps there was no code solutions, and stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, I was terrible at it, and I never claimed to be the world's best engineer, but I struggled through it, kind of worked through it as best as I could. I had a mentor, and there's a family friend who was just really helpful, right? Like, hey, I got stuck. Hey, I'm at this snag. Can you take a look at it? This doesn't seem to be working. He had built apps and submitted apps in the past, so it was, I literally had kind of a Sherpa, so to speak, that was kind of guiding me through, the darker parts of the journey. So if I didn't have him, I wouldn't, Under the Radar would have never launched. I would have given up. I wouldn't have known who to go to. I would have probably just gotten, stuck at some point and tried and just been like, I probably can't do this. So I owe a lot to the level of, attention and thoughtfulness that, he gave to me at that age.
And you mentioned this a minute ago, but so Under the Radar had two meanings. Obviously, Under the Radar for the ringtones, going under the radar, but two was helping to benefit those people that live under the radar. And you were donating. So the app costed $1. It was 20 cents, you said, that went to every purchase went to free the children?
Correct. Yeah. So it was 99 cents per download. 20 cents went to free the children. And then I took majority of what I made from the app, actually. And there was a school in Delhi, in the Delhi slums, and gave school supplies to about 1,500 students. School supplies for 1,500 students. There wasn't 1,500 students at the school. There was about 300. So it was like multiple years worth of kind of supplies and stuff. And, I actually have a lot of photos of being there and handing it out. And, it's funny, Jacob, I thought about this a month or so ago, then I forgot about it, but now you reminded me. I actually, on my camera, videotaped. I was asking a lot of the kids questions all over India when I was there. Kids in the school, even kids in, that were selling street trinkets. And, I remember asking them, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this one girl was like, oh, I want to be a teacher. And I'm like, oh, that's so amazing. Like, and she's like, yeah, I want to come back to this school and teach other kids like me. Girl was like 9. I remember like, I almost like started bawling my eyes out. I'm like, holy, like the level of selflessness that these people have is just, it's incredible. Like there's no desire for, billions or massive wealth accumulation. It's just like, just wanting to pay it forward. And I would kill to find all those videos. I don't know. You're going to spark some crazy weekend hunt for me, man. Now that I'm thinking about it, because I would love to be able to find those videos and just watch them back, because it was really, really inspiring and really, really cool. And I definitely think changed my mentality of what I want in my own life and the experiences that I wanted to have.
Sure. I stumbled across some of the old photos when I was doing my research for this. Like I found some of them at the school. Like I think they were like hand drawn Under the Radar pictures or something like that. Like it was super cool. And so was that after Dragon's Den, or did you do that before?
It was after Dragon's Den. So, the app hit number 2 on the iTunes store, and, that brought a lot of publicity and a good amount of downloads. And then, my mom had always taught me about paying it forward. Like, listen, I'm not naive. I grew up very privileged, right? My mom is a lawyer. My father was a dentist. My family, like I said, it all had master's degrees. So, it's not like I grew up in, a nice family home with, where we went on vacations and I got to, get new basketball shoes, and, new cleats and, they would drive me to my friends' places. And, I had a very, very blessed life. I still have a very, very blessed life. And my mom had always taught me, like, it's always important to pay it forward. So I was like, this is my way of paying all the help, my uncle that came and spent countless hours helping me design this app, my family that convinced me to go on Dragon's Den, all this stuff. This was my way of, paying forward their, respect and time that they had given me. I thought it was the best way for me to do that. So that's kind of why I decided to do that. And then I think it was, for me, if anything, it was a very important pivotal moment in my upbringing, in my life. So I'm happy that I did.
So obviously then you're a believer still in impact capital, right? Like that's what you used to do a lot of your talks on was around that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And why do you think that it's like, it's not as popular as it should be right now?
Yeah. It got really popular for a little bit with Tom's shoes, and there was that glasses company and there was all that type of stuff. And it kind of just died out. Like, I don't really see many consumer brands that are like, hey, for every product sold, there's this, or for every that, for every X, there's a Y. Companies try to have, strong corporate missions, which I think is really cool. And obviously a lot of, the billionaires have, committed to like the Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, giving pledge, which I think is phenomenal and so cool. But yeah, like I really think there's more opportunity for smart consumer apps to say, I don't mind losing 15-20% of my margins because I hope people will align with our vision and our message. So yeah, that I don't know. Like I definitely think there should be more. I think as a consumer, if I have option A or option B, I remember there was a study that I referenced in talks I used to give where it's like, if there's two comparable products and one's 10% more expensive, but there's a social giving aspect to it, 90% of people or 85% of people would choose that product. So I think there should be more, but I haven't seen a notable one of late that's popped up. So, I guess it is what it is, unfortunately.
Do you think part of the reason that it kind of had its moment in time there and then it went away was because people started kind of understand that people would pick their products over others and it became more of a marketing tool than actually a way to give back? And then consumers started to lose trust in these companies because they thought it was just a marketing tactic?
Yeah, that's a great point, man. Like, I think society is very interesting where it's like, I find people poke holes in anything that exists. It's very hard to be a white knight nowadays or anything along those lines. And my philosophy on that was like, I don't care if they're doing it for publicity. I'm like, it's better than the other company that's not doing it for publicity because at least they're doing something. That was my counter answer whenever I would give a talk and someone would say, hey, but what do you say to companies that don't actually care about the cause and they just do it so that, they look better? And I'm like, I don't care. Does the money still go to the people who need it? Does the product still go to the people who need it? And the answer was always, well, I guess it does. Well, then it's what matters. But, I guess companies have maybe moved away from it and said, we don't potentially want that. It's better to just launch the product itself. And, and listen, I'm even at fault for it, right? Like, with Trufan, right? Like, I think as a team, we're very focused on, social impact and charitable causes. And we talk about it and we're open, but we don't have a direct social giving, related to our business. And, so I could call myself a hypocrite, so to speak, but definitely thinking of ways of doing it. I think surf is actually something that I want to figure out how to do it with, because I think it aligns really well with it being a consumer product. Obviously haven't figured it out yet. I think when I was young, I thought that it was always very simple. It was always like, oh, any company can do it. It's so easy. And I still think that any company can do it, but I don't think it's as easy as just doing it. There's nuances and stuff that you have to figure out and doing it the right way, that I think we need to figure out on our side. But, for anyone that's watching this and is saying, hey, you guys don't do anything, you shouldn't be saying this, they have a fair point. And I'm happy to, it's something that is important to me to figure out and it's on the roadmap. It's just, haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I think I recently interviewed Mario, like RDB's CEO, on here, and they do something like that. So basically what they realized was over in Europe, like there's kind of like a holding company that owns most of the agencies, and you have to pay like a 20% fee back to the holding company every year. And so what they did with RDB is they decided to strike it on their own and then take that 20% fee that they're normally paying and reinvest it into their own company so that they could work with companies that couldn't afford them. So essentially they were using that to cover the costs for nonprofits and stuff. So they were giving back with the services that they provided, which I think was really, really cool. So that's like it just came to me now, like a recent example of a company that's doing that. But you mentioned surf there, and like I know we're like kind of jumping all over the place, and normally I don't jump around this much, but I do want to make sure we talk about surf because that was kind of one of the impetuses of doing this podcast today. And so for surf, I know like when it comes to Trufan, one of the things from the get-go has kind of been democratizing social data, right? Like it was activating your grassroots communities was one of the early on messaging, but it has kind of, I know like kind of democratizing social data has kind of been in the background that whole time. But when did the messaging switch to it wasn't about grassroots community as much now, more so about ownness of data?
Yeah, that's a great point, Jacob. I think as the company evolved and we went to market and we found out from, market, like, hey, like, what are businesses wanting? And, people wanted more data and they wanted more data and more data and more data and more data. And it never really stops. I don't think if I went to any customer and said, hey, I can give you more data, would you like that for the same cost? They would be like, yeah, throw it on. And in realizing that, we said, well, who's winning? Right? What does the power balance look like? What does the dynamic look like of this exchange? And, who are winning were the big companies, right? $500 billion of data value was made from large tech companies in 2020, right? Now, yes, I get to use Facebook Messenger for free, but, Facebook makes a ton of money, right? Like, yes, I get to use Google Maps for free, and I love Google Maps, but, Google also takes a lot of my data on where I'm going and what I'm doing. And, there was a point where I said, listen, I think it's a balance, right? Our ethos is not, hey, you should get all the money that Google makes, right? It's unrealistic, right? And on the flip side, I know that, people might not want to pay $2 a month for Google Maps, $1 a month for Google Maps, right? And not be advertised to. On the flip side, you have products like Neva, which are $5 subscription fees per month for a fully non-tracking, non-ad browsing environment. And to be fair, it was founded by Google's ad network founder. So, raised $100 million in the first 2 seconds. But, people were buying it and people were interested in that. And I guess what us at, me, Swish, and the entire team started thinking is, well, the end consumer really seems to be getting cut out of this. Right? It's all of our data that's feeding all of these decisions that are making these companies billions and billions of dollars that are rewarding their shareholders. But the regular person is kind of just being cut out. And data has only gotten more valuable over the last couple of years. So there was a two-pronged thing of like, well, everyone's data has value. So why doesn't everyone get value back for their data? And there was a break in logic there to us. We just didn't understand that, right? Like even with our own products, like with our product where we help businesses get first-party data through giveaways, right? 10,000 people enter the giveaway, 5 people win. But all of the 10,000 people's data that they shared has some value. Again, it's not, the $10,000 grand prize worth, but it has some value. So our thought process is, well, can we layer on a product that gives everyone value? There's not a single person that gets left behind. And, one person's browsing data isn't worth more than another person's browsing data. Everyone just gets compensated equally and fairly. And, what would a future look like that of the internet? So that's kind of where it really got started.
And how long ago did these conversations start to happen between you and Swish? Like, were you guys just like brainstorming one day, or like, how did this come up?
So it's a funny story. It was a Tuesday or something, or a Wednesday, or I think it was a Tuesday. And I had just been hearing from Marco, who's our sales director, how a prospective customer was saying that they loved the product, but they wanted more consumer data. And they felt that it was hard for them to go out and for us to go out and bring in consumers for these different campaigns. They wanted it more consistently. And I was like, well, obviously everyone wants it more consistently and everyone wants more consumers, but it kind of got me thinking like, brands really, they kind of suck at getting people aligned on certain things, right? For the most part. And, I was thinking and, long story short, that, went about my day. And then, at 2:30 a.m., it just hit me. It just slapped me right in the face. I'm like, well, why don't we give everyone value back for their data and build it as like, an extension or something. And then businesses can just come to us and get the data that we got from the consumer rather than trying to build the infrastructure that allows the brand to connect with the consumer. Why don't we build the product that connects with the consumer? Why are we kind of being the background person that just builds the infrastructure? Why can't we just go to the consumer directly? And obviously it was very, very rough. So I called Swish first thing. I wrote everything down on a note. I still have that note. And then I called Swish immediately, or I texted him and I said, hey, are you up? Because it was 3:30 a.m. for him, or like 4 a.m. for him in Calgary.
And he was up though, right? I'm assuming.
Of course he was up. It's Swish. He's a night owl. So we called and we hashed through it. And we talked for 3.5 hours. I think the call ended at 6:30 a.m. my time and 7:30 a.m. his time. And that was where, the concept of surf was really birthed or created. It was the genesis, is this idea that everyone should be rewarded for their data. And I have a friend of mine who just such a brilliant guy. And we were, he was giving, he's very, very successful. His company actually is recently, being SPAC'd for billions. And he was gracious enough to give Swish and I some time to go over our deck and our pitch of surf. And he said, if I could I was having this conversation with some friends, is like, if the US Constitution was redrafted right now, everyone would have a right to their data and a right to earn from their data. And he's like, that's why what I think you guys is doing is really cool. And that it really just comes down to the fact that like we own our data, but we have no ownership of it. And that's a weird concept to have. And Surf is going to change that.
And so then practically how Surf works is it's a browser extension that you download, free to use. And then it tracks your data and then gives you points in exchange. And you can then redeem those points for different rewards like gift cards, different places. There's also a donation component there. If you want, you can donate your points and money as well. And so how does then, so if you're still tracking consumers, but then you're anonymizing the data on the back end, right? Like how does that work?
Yeah. So it's super straightforward, right? We obviously we get your first name, last name, email, all that stuff, but really what we share with brands, and we're not going to be sharing it for brands for a pretty significant period of time because we want to build up this cohort. So it's, it's more anonymous than even anonymous. But, for example, let's say we had 10 users, okay? And one of those 10 users was me. And I'm a male, in between the ages of 22 and 24, that is from the West Coast of Canada. You could even say, lives on the West Coast of Canada. You could even say, lives in Vancouver, right? And I'm really interested in technology and cryptocurrency and gaming, right? So now a brand like FTX comes in and says, hey, we're really interested in what, men, in that age demographic who are interested in crypto. What other things do they like? Right. And now if we only have me, we'd have to tell the brand, well, we only have data on one person, but this is what he likes. He is a male, age 18 to 24, who's interested in crypto, who lives in the West Coast of Canada. And this is the other thing he's interested in. He's really interested in gaming. And in fact, he watches a lot of TSM videos. So now FTX could go back and they could say, oh, wow, this one guy. Now, if we gave FTX that data, they're not going to know it's me. You know how many guys there are on the West Coast of Canada, age 18, age 22 to 24, that like crypto? Probably tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, right? So there's no way they can ever track that back to me because we don't share your email. We don't ever give FTX a way to contact that user. Surf would never give FTX a way to contact me. But what FTX could do is say, well, imagine instead of one person, it's 100,000 people. And of those 100,000 people that are interested in crypto, 90,000 people spend a lot of time on gaming companies. And of those 90,000, 70,000 are really aligned with TSM. Well, now FTX can go and say, well, that makes sense. People like this, crypto gaming, it makes a lot of sense. Why don't we get into gaming? Oh, well, it seems like, majority of the people that are into this like TSM. Why don't we work with TSM? That's the type of directional information we can provide to the brand. It'll never go back to the individual. The brand will never be able to get in front of the individual personally through email, phone number, whatever. We are going to build something that we want to call like your brand mailbox, where if FTX wants to submit rewards to people who are in this space, hey, if you sign up for the new FTX TSM newsletter, you get a brand new TSM jersey on us, right? If I can present that to the user and I can say, hey, we didn't share anything, you don't have to share anything, but if you want the jersey and you're cool signing up for the newsletter, we're just surfacing the opportunity to you. That's the furthest we will ever go with giving a brand information, is we will allow a brand to put their message in front of an anonymous group of people. And if that anonymous group of people chooses on their own right to accept and share their information, then the brand can receive the information. Otherwise, we will never give them that information ever.
So essentially, Surf will give the brands, exterior brands, all data minus data that identifies that consumer. So anything that identifies where that data comes from is removed entirely.
Exactly.
It's just, I understand.
Yeah. And a lot of companies, they do that, but then they let the business get in front of the person directly. Like, oh, I want to get in front of this one person, right? Or I want to send them an ad, or I want to send them an email. I don't know who they are, but I'm going to send them an email and it's going to hit their email inbox. Or, oh, I'm going to send them an ad. So next time all over their Google, they see FTX ads. We don't want that, because I don't want someone to get spammed in their inbox, and I don't want their, because they started looking up cats, all they get is cat ads on Google, right? What I want is if a brand cares enough about that audience to give them value for their data, they can propose that to the individual. But I don't want them being able to get in front of that individual on any platform other than Surf, because we know we can protect the consumer there.
And this doesn't block Google from tracking or anything, right?
No, not at the moment. And again, our philosophy was people still love Google Chrome. They still love using these products. So we don't necessarily want to make them pick or choose one or the other. We just want to give them the opportunity to earn from something that they're constantly already giving up. And the first step of that was, hey, you can use whatever you want, ad block, VPN, Google, this, that. Just earn a little bit while you're doing that. And maybe the future is, hey, there's options for people who want to cut themselves off from those types of products. And can we build better solutions for them? I think there's a lot of ways we can go. But for the first step was, let's make the barrier to entry for this product as simple and easy as possible. Anyone can use it with any preference, as long as you're aligned with the fact that you want to earn from something that you're constantly already giving up.
And so you mentioned how you're not going to be taking the data and selling it to brands for a while, right? Like you're just kind of focused on user acquisition in the beginning, which obviously makes sense because brands aren't going to come if you have
just
however many. Yeah, if it's just you on the platform, brands aren't coming to pay for that data right away. And so when it comes to Trufan as a whole, then like you're doing this, you've built Surf because it's something you fundamentally believe in, but at the end of the day, this is still a business. So obviously to build Surf, to grow it, to put money into growing it without monetizing it on the back end is got to be somewhat of a risk to you guys as a company as a whole. So why did you decide that now was a time and this was a product that had to be built by Trufan right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a few things. Number one is that it goes back to the fact that, right now with Trufan, we do service a lot of great brands, a lot of big brands. And we were hearing that, web data was becoming more and more of an area that they were interested in because of privacy changes that were happening, whether it's third-party cookies, GDPR, CCPA, all this stuff. It was hard for them to get quality data. And even the competitors that did exist were doing it through third-party data tracking and really kind of shady ways, in my opinion. So we were hearing that. And in the same time, we were coming up with this whole idea that everyone deserves to earn from their data. So those two things aligned. And what we realized is Surf is a brand for the consumer. Surf is a community that the consumer can be a part of. At the end of the day, the brand is still going to interact with Trufan. And we still want to be the one-stop shop for social and grassroots data, for first-party data. We just want to add web data as another level, kind of lever, or another room that someone can go in and access and learn from. At the end of the day, at school, I was studying data, albeit for 2 years before I stopped. But one of the things that I learned is that data becomes infinitely more valuable when you can tack it onto other areas. It's anything in life. If you make a decision in a vacuum, it's really hard to understand how that decision impacts and affects other things. If we can get social data and first-party data and web data, and in the future, other types of data potentially, businesses are now not making decisions in a vacuum of one vertical, but can actually consolidate everything in one place and make a fully informed decision. And that's what Trufan will be for brands. It'll be the place to get, compliant and consumer supported data. And on the consumer side, we'll have brands, whether it's Surf, right? We have Player, which is all the giveaway stuff. We have Surf now, which is going to be the extension. Maybe Surf will do other things or we'll launch other brands. And the goal of those brands is to build trust and authenticity with consumers. I didn't want to go to consumers and say, download the Trufan extension, because Trufan's a B2B SaaS company, right? Surf is fun, it's energetic, it's young. I wanted Surf to feel like an outdoor adventure brand to people. That's what I wanted people to feel like. And some people are like, oh, Surf should invoke trust, it should invoke data, it should invoke privacy. And honestly, as a company, we said, yeah, but it should be fun. It should be light. It should be something that people want to engage with, and it gives them a warm feeling, because at the end of the day, our goal is to change the way that consumers feel like they should interact in the data economy. Fundamentally, I wouldn't care if Surf failed, but the way that the data landscape changed was that businesses realized that they had to reward consumers, that they couldn't just keep treating internet users like an extractable resource. If we could be the spark that was or the catalyst for that change, even if Surf didn't pick up, that would be more than enough for whatever I wanted to accomplish for this product.
And so I'm curious where, like, obviously you're comfortable, like you understand, like if it fails, you're okay as long as it has the impact. But obviously you want to succeed. So where do you get kind of the inside? Because obviously as an entrepreneur, you have to be comfortable with risk, and putting a lot of time and effort, energy, and money into Surf is a risk for Trufan. Like Trufan was doing well when it was Player and Trufan, and now you're adding this other thing, which is taking a lot of time, energy, and money, like I said, into it. And granted, I believe in the product. I wouldn't have stepped away from my own business to come work on Surf full time, like if I didn't believe in the product. But so I'm curious, just from your perspective, like where are you able to kind of stomach that risk, for lack of a better word, and kind of invest all of this time, everything into Surf?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just conviction. I think conviction that Swish and I had, then conviction of, it's interesting. I can't remember where I read this quote. I think it might have been from Sabia, who is our partner from Moneta Ventures, who invested in us in our seed round. And he said that at first glance, a lot of ideas can seem good. But when you sit with an idea for a week or so and you stomach it and you wrestle it, and the idea only gets better, that's when you know you have a good idea. And I think he said that to us a week and a half after we told him about Surf, was that he was excited the first call, but he was like, I don't know. And then a week and a half later, he goes, we have to do this. And I think that's what we felt with everyone we've talked to about Surf. With my friends, with my family, with our team, the more people hear about it, the more they think about it and they internalize it, it always seems to make more sense. It never seems to be, oh, but now that I thought about it, this is really silly. It's always like, oh, the more that I thought about it, and I'm not trying to toot our own horns or, gas up us, but there's been plenty of ideas that Swish and I, like in the first day, we had a midnight call. Oh my God, this is great. This is awesome. And then we slept on it and we're like, holy shit, this was really bad. It's not that smart. Or 2 days later, we're like, it's probably not the best. We probably shouldn't do that. But I think, and him and I didn't tell anyone for a week. We sat, we researched, we stomached, we researched, we stomached. And eventually we were like, we can't deny this. There's nothing that we can do to deny this. So I think that gave us the conviction to take the risk of, potentially diversifying our focus and splitting things up, because we felt that, we had the conviction for it, and our network of supporters had conviction for it as well. And at the end of the day, we think it really ties into what we see the vision of Trufan being in the future, of a company that supplies brands multiple types of high fidelity data. And Surf was just another really important piece to add to that long-term vision.
Bringing it back to something we talked about at the beginning in terms of trusting your gut and not necessarily reading those extra couple articles, how do you then balance that versus taking the time to step away and really think about these decisions? Which I understand in the case of Surf, like it's such a massive decision that it warrants such a timed reflection period. But like, how do you know typically when you should take time away from going all into an idea versus trusting your gut and just kind of running headfirst into it?
Yeah, for sure. I think, Swish and I went headfirst into it. Within a day and a half, we had a 5-6 page document constructed from my notes and his notes and our conversations. And then we kind of took a step back. We said, all right, let's go back. Those, honestly, people don't realize at the company, those 2 days we were checked out. we were only thinking about surf. And like, yes, we were on calls and we were going, but it was really like, our minds were somewhere else. Um, and then, and then we kind of took a step back and we said, okay, refocus on everything we need to focus on, really dial in, and just have it be a thing that brews in the back of your head when you're eating dinner or when you're talking to your friends or when him and I are chatting. And then so Tuesday, by Wednesday night, Thursday, we had that one pager. And then by Monday, we said, okay, now we're going to start letting our investors and the team know because we have the conviction. So it was a mix of a lot of heavy conviction we could have, dismissed it and said, hey, this is just a pipe dream, whatever. But we had such conviction in our guts that we wrote everything down and we organized it so that when we were reflecting, we weren't reflecting on tattered notes and text messages on our phones, but an actual document that we could understand. And I think that also allowed us to reflect in a more time, sensitive manner, which then gave us the conviction to kind of spread the idea with the team and our community.
If you look back at some of the other pivotal moments in Trufan's lifespan thus far, the two biggest ones that obviously come to mind is probably the two acquisitions, right? The acquisition of SocialRank, the acquisition of Player. So how does this pivotal moment in the company differ from those previous ones? Because now that you're building the product yourself and not acquiring another platform.
I think we get more direction and we get more clarity. The interesting thing about the two acquisitions was that we weren't even trying to. Alex Taub, was just a friend, right? And we liked their company and we thought they were awesome. And I got on a catch-up call with him just to see how he was doing. Literally no intention of reaching out, M&A. It's like, hey man, like you guys are awesome. And like, you're a really dope dude. What they're building right now with Upstream is awesome. Like just catching up. And all of a sudden he goes, yeah, we're sunsetting, SocialRank because we have a lot of conviction for this other idea. I'm like, what? Like, what does that mean? What do you mean you're sunsetting? It's like, oh, we're pretty much turning it off. And I'm like, oh, okay. Sad about it, thought about it. I'm like, hey man, like, there's a lot of synergy between our two products. Could we bring in some of your technology? Because we were hearing from our customers that they wanted to do more. They liked, I think at the end of the day, the acquisitions always just came from a stem of our customers wanted to do more with us. And, the SocialRank acquisition was really great because it was, a new piece of technology that really complemented, and it was very easy to integrate and we were off to the races. The Player acquisition was, candidly, it was just as much about the team as it was about the product, right? I can't name everyone, but, Andrew, Kieran, Rod, Lucas, Sarah, Ryan, Austin, I'm probably missing JR, like I'm probably missing people, and if I did, I apologize, but, the team was great and we just synergized really, really well. And we said, they want the same vision that we want. The conviction that they had, the vision that they had was a very similar vision. They were just coming at it from a different angle than us. So it just made sense to kind of consolidate the forces. And obviously we were a bit bigger in the sense of revenue and other stuff, but they were really, really incredible people that we were happy just to bring on. So I guess this differentiates because it's, we have 100,000% of the direction, and it's entirely, every piece is being led by someone who's been a part of the company for a minimum of 8 months, right? Versus the Player acquisition, Andrew was our CTO, but we just got to know him. You know what I mean? Now everyone's been sipping the Trufan Kool-Aid for the last 8 months. So there's a strong conviction from, Swish down to, interns that were with us for a couple months over the summer.
And kind of back to that original, the SocialRank acquisition, what is the stat? Something like 70% of acquisitions of tech, or what is it? 70% of acquisitions failed in the first year because they can't manage the new tech. So how did you guys go about integrating that tech into Trufan so that it didn't fail? Because like that was still very early on in Trufan's lifespan. Like there's bigger companies that have acquired tech and it hasn't worked out. So how did you guys make it work?
I think it's humility and it's just really embracing it. I think a lot of people, when they acquire a company, there's this mentality of like, oh, we're better because we acquired them. And, we looked at it objectively. We said, this thing of ours is not great. Theirs is really good. This thing of theirs isn't the best, and ours is better. And we just really tried to sew the best pieces of the technology together and be very, very objective about it. To be honest, there was no ego. There was no, some founders don't want to give up things that they built because it's their baby, it's their product. Swish and I were like, theirs is better. Bring it in. We don't care. we're not ashamed to say that they built, you know, their version of this was better than our version of this. That's why we wanted to bring them in the first place, right? So I think that's really what allowed us to do well, is that there was very low ego. It was just, hey, we want to take of the resources that we have, we want to take what we can to build the best product and experience for our customer. That's what matters. Nothing else matters. And that objective mindset, I think, allowed us to succeed.
And then, so you mentioned with Player was mainly, it was like, obviously there was the acquisition of the product, but also a team, which is completely different from the SocialRank acquisition, because SocialRank was no team as far as I'm aware. It was just product. So then how, obviously, like I was there, I kind of got to watch it, but from your perspective, like how did you guys go about integrating the Player team? Because integrating a product is one thing, but integrating people is a completely different ballgame.
Again, I think it's just a mutual respect thing again, and a humility thing, right? The first call that Swish and I had Andrew as CTO was like, you're the CTO. This is your tech team. This is not, you are like, and that was just our approach, right? It's like, we brought these people on for a reason, give them the responsibility and get them excited, right? I think, I hear this from some of my friends whose companies have been acquired, where it's like, during the acquisition process, they talk to you like, you're the coolest person in the world. And then as soon as you join the company, no one cares and everyone's bored, and, no one, and that was the last thing I wanted. It was like, you guys are super talented. Here are the reins. Do what you do best. And if you do that, then and we were confident that the people we were bringing on would step up to that challenge. That's why we had conviction about bringing them in, and they have, and more. And I think that's how you succeed. At the end of the day, I think so much of it is just being willing to let go and give other people responsibility. I think, if you can do that, then I think you can succeed.
And so how has your day-to-day or how did it change when the Player team came on board?
I was a lot less involved in engineering, which is such a good thing for our customers and whoever. Obviously I got to focus more on product. I love product and I like data, but I'm not like, Andrew is much better at solving an engineer's problem than me. And when I mean much better, I mean like 1,000,000 times better because he's been an engineer, a very high level engineer for 20 plus years. I have been an engineer, an average one at that, for like 2 years. Right. So I think that was really cool, is that, I got to focus more on product and operations, and I had to learn what that meant and how to shift my focus. But I've really enjoyed that. And I love working with Andrew and the engineering team because I'm a lot more focused on product and design. I get to work with Lucas and Andrew and our engineers, and less so like, how are we planning this sprint? And funny thing is, although I've been less involved, I've learned so much more because we have someone like Andrew who's leading, that I've learned just so much from him. So yeah, I've got to focus on some other stuff, which has been really, really, really cool, and I've enjoyed it.
So I'm a little confused as to how product and engineering differs. Like whenever I hear product, I assume it's like the engineering that goes into building that product. So like, what is that line? Like, how are those two things different?
I think what I mean by engineering is, I mean like the writing and the creation of the code and the problems and the bugs that exist from that on the physical, like writing the code level, versus product to me is more like, how are we prioritizing different features? How are we planning what our future product roadmap will look like? How do we balance suggestions from different customers to create, the features that have the most impact in the shortest amount of time? I think that's how my distinction is a little bit. Obviously, they're very intertwined. Don't get me wrong. Like, to understand product, you have to be able to understand what is feasible to code and not to code. But I think like being more involved on that side and less involved on like day-to-day engineering, I think has been what my transition was, and I've enjoyed that.
And so maybe I might be oversimplifying this, so tell me if I am. But so kind of like my interpretation of that is like the product is almost like the higher level versus the engineering is kind of the nitty gritty down in the dirt, actually making things work, versus product is kind of like looking at things up above and kind of mapping it out more. So that kind of makes sense.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Definitely fair to say. Yeah.
And so what have you kind of with the acquisition, the team size, which I remember when I first started working with Trufan, it was like, I think my first team call had like 7 people on it or something, like versus now it's over 40 people. So how have you kind of adapted, evolved as a leader in these last, I'm trying to think, been like just over 18 months now. I think February is when I started to like, it's just crazy. It's like, how have you changed as a leader in that time?
Yeah, we're 25 full-time. And then, like you said, if you add in all the interns and the contractors and even, the agency partners that we work with, the overall Trufan, community is, yeah, like you said, close to 40, but even 25 full-time people is insane. Like it is very, very insane and pretty crazy. So, for me, I think it's giving responsibility to department leads and just trying to solve people's problems. Like I always joke, like my goal as a COO is to solve people's problems. I can solve people's problems and they can focus more time on their job. And if they focus more time on their job, the company succeeds because they're better at doing their job than I am at doing that job. But I might be better at solving the problems because most problems in companies are interdepartmental or are multifaceted, and problems that are just like within one department usually get solved very quickly. It's usually more when like, oh, like we're trying to work towards this joint thing, but I'm waiting on this and this is having issues. And that's where I really like to come in and try to optimize things and work through things. So I think that's the key thing, is just giving people autonomy and respect, but also building a very open culture for people to share problems or when things aren't working, so that we as a team can collectively work together to fix it.
How do you balance as the team grows? Like it becomes kind of the analogy I always look at as like a speedboat versus a cruise ship, right? Like when you're small, you can make turns, you can pivot very quickly, versus as everything continues to grow, it becomes harder and harder to pivot and change things up. It's like, how do you balance those two things as you scale?
Yeah, I think what like I don't want every decision to have to be rung up the flagpole. I don't want every decision to be like, yeah, like, hey, like I think this is an idea, so I'm going to tell this person, and that person tells that person, and that person tells that person, and you're finding Slack messages and you're trying to book a call, and someone's idea took 4 days to get to the person who can improve it. To that analogy, I would prefer to have all the people on the cruise ship organized into their distinct groups and for all of them to drive a speedboat. So the issue is with that is that if everyone's aligned, you can turn really fast. But if some people are turning fast and other people don't get the memo, you can crash. So there's pros and cons. I think what we're trying to build with the team is that multiple speedboat analogy where people can move and make decisions. Again, it can't be a decision where you're turning around and you're going to head on clash with someone, but you can make micro adjustments. And the thing is that you can make those micro adjustments and those changes, and the team hopefully has enough wherewithal and are checking their left and right to see that happen, right? Or it's like, if it's not just individual speedboats, it's like you have like a yacht and speedboats behind them, so to speak. And the yacht is like your team lead, and the speedboats can make the micro decisions. The yacht will then move, and it'll tell all the other yachts, who will then move, which then their little speedboats behind them move. So it's like, you don't have to tell 1,000 people. You just have to tell one person, and that one person has to tell 5 people. And now we're all moving in the same direction.
That's a really good way to look at it. Like I always never like breaking it down into smaller groups, but kind of flashing back to March 2020, COVID hits, the team has to leave the office, like pretty much kind of drop everything and dip. What was going through your mind? Where did you think this is where Trufan would be at this point in time? Like what's running through your mind when COVID hit?
Honestly, like a lot. Like, prospective customer calls that we had were getting postponed and canceled, and no one really wanted to talk. And it's a pretty scary time, I think, for a lot of startups, unless you were in video conferencing or the food delivery. But we as a team, we started remote. The core 4 or 5, first full-time team members were all remote. So we were pretty comfortable with it. And we just tried to adapt. We tried to adapt as best as we could. We tried to get involved in initiatives that were supporting businesses during COVID. So, honestly, I think the interesting thing about our journey with Trufan is like, I think Swish and I would both say this, like, we're finally at the vision that I think we were always supposed to get to. And the journey there was the weirdest, craziest, and wackiest journey. But I finally feel like this vision is one that is just going to stick with us for a really, really, really long time. And I think, COVID was a part of us getting here. I think, I always try to look at the past as like everything happened for a reason. Nothing is, obviously some things are really, really bad luck or ill fate or whatever it may be, but trying to look at everything as, these things happen for a reason, and I just need to take these experiences and learn from them and use it to shape the best possible future that I can. And I think that's, as a team, I think we all feel somewhat like that for the most part, at least with work. that we've done that with, the whole COVID situation.
And kind of thinking how now the vision's kind of finally in place, like the original vision, like what you kind of foresaw back in the day. How do you keep going through those tough moments, or when the vision, like at the time, is looking like it might not be what you want it to be, or you're heading in a direction you didn't think you would be? Like, what keeps you going in those moments? Obviously, I understand you founded the company; it's your company, but like, it's still tough. So, like, what keeps you going?
I think it's like not being overly rigid. It's being like, bend, don't break, right? Like, you know, like being flexible to move and adapt, but keep that same North Star, right? I read a book about, the Airbnb founders and their story, and like they had a lot of moments where it was like, this is a bend, don't break moment, but they were very strong about bending a lot, being very flexible, but not breaking their ethos and their vision. And a lot of other people would have broke. So I think that's just conviction we need to have, right? Like if Swish and I firmly believe, which we do, that the future of the internet, that there has to be a future version of the internet that rewards people for their data. If we believe that, and our investors and our community believe that, then that needs to be what we march towards, right? I'm not saying we're Airbnb, but if Airbnb's vision was that everyone who owns a home or an apartment should be able to rent it out to people and be able to profit off of what they own, or you should be able to stay in anyone's homes, or anyone should be able to create a memorable experience, right? Bend, don't break, right? I think for me, I want to make it very clear that like I have a tremendous amount of conviction that the future of the internet has to be where people can earn from their data. There has to be a future version of that internet. I would not be happy if a future version of the internet does not take place. So that to me is extremely, extremely important.
And kind of speaking of those bend don't break moments, COVID had to be one of those moments. Like you said, prospective client calls were drying up because people were rescheduling them, canceling them. And it must have been scary. And I know I had Swish on that, probably this was months ago now we talked with this, but like you guys made the call to not take a salary or anything during that time, to make sure you didn't let anyone go because of COVID. Even though like it's a very legitimate excuse to have let people go, you guys made that call to not take salaries. Why? Like, walk me through the decision to do that, because that's not something a lot of people did or would be willing to do.
Well, I think in a startup, right, like, the founders are the people that need to take the most sacrifice and the most risk. If you're part of a startup where that's not the mentality of your founders, then, I don't want to say anything bad, but, I really think that should be the mentality of your founders, is like, we're the first people to cut pay, right? I don't want to let anyone on our team go because they're all extremely talented and they're all really, really good at what they do. So, because at the end of the day, right, when you think of a company, right, the who owns the company, right? Usually the founders own a lot of the company. So if I own a lot of the company, which means if the company succeeds, I have a good upside. I need to do whatever it is in my path for the company to succeed, not for me in this short-term period to be successful, right? So for Swish and I, it was really a no-brainer. I was like, all right, well, we need to save some money to keep people around and keep the company going. Okay, well, what are we going to cut first? Okay, let's cut salary. Done. It wasn't a very hard decision. We were just like, and again, not everyone has that luxury. Like, I can live at home with my mom, right? And I can have a place to live and I can have food to eat and be supported. And Swish has, and we've saved money from other things that we've done in our lives, right? So like we can be comfortable. I'm not saying that we're very blessed, right? I'm very aware of our privilege and our blessings that way. But for us, based on our lives and our circumstances, that was an easy decision to make.
I must say that's something that I appreciate, especially when I first found that out. I can't remember where I found it out because I brought up with Swish on the podcast, and Swish was like, I didn't think anybody knew about that. So I can't remember how I found that out. But just like I kind of reflecting on it, like that was March 2020. So that was literally like my second month working with Trufan. I wasn't a full-time employee. I was one of those people that could have very easily and understandably been cut. And you guys made the decision not to do that. So something like in reflection, I'm very appreciative for is you guys making that call. Because that was a pivotal time for me. And like, because of that, I kind of built on what I had and was able to take my own business full-time, which again, super appreciative of. But kind of, I know we're kind of running out of time. We've got a couple minutes left here. how often, I'm going to jump to my last two questions here. Maybe we'll have to run it back at some point. Like we didn't touch Dragon's Den or anything. Like there's so many stuff we glossed over. There's just so many things. But how often do you look back on the whole journey? I have a quote here. This was in an interview shortly after Dragon's Den is, I'm not going to be a one-hit wonder. And you haven't been. You've lived up to that statement of not wanting to be a one-hit wonder. It's like, how often do you reflect on the whole journey?
Damn, I said that, eh? Shit. Well, when you said that, I'm like, shit, I was a cocky kid. Oh my God. I needed to rein myself in a little bit. Listen, I am, I'm 20. I try to reflect a lot. Honestly, I really try to reflect a lot. I wouldn't say I reflect a lot on the Trufan journey a lot as much as I should. And sometimes wishing I do. And he sends me a screenshot of something, or I send him a picture, and I'm like, this was 3 years ago. It's like, oh my God. But I really try to do reflect on my life, and I try to wake up a better version of Aanikh than I was yesterday. And if I can do that every day, I think I'll find peace and happiness in my life. Listen, I by no means do I think that I'm uber successful or anything like that. I can't believe I fucking said that, man. I'm like looking back, I'm like, man, like that's it's a 16-year-old prick Aanikh. But no, honestly, I think the ethos of that, how I would say that now as a 23-year-old, is that I wanted to continue to have impact. I wanted to continue to build companies or products or whatever it may be, nonprofits, record labels, gaming companies, whatever, that had impact on people and made people's lives better, whether it was through the product or the entertainment or the feeling that they had using whatever I created or hearing what I created or whatever it may be. That to me was important. And I'm proud of what we've done with Trufan. Like, when I tell people that Netflix uses our tool, people's minds are blown, right? And I don't always reflect on that. Like, that is really, I am extremely proud of that. I'm extremely proud of our team and everyone. I'm proud of you, Jacob, and what you've accomplished and how you've helped us grow. Like, that to me is really, really important. And I will strive for that. Like, I don't think I'll ever be comfortable, just not having impact, right? And again, if I try my best and my best fails, I'm okay with that. But I'll probably try something new very, very soon because I'm obsessed with impact. Honestly, I'm obsessed with impacting my friends' lives, my family's lives, my coworkers' lives, my company's lives, and the lives of people who use the things that I create. That to me is really, really important. And in that vein, I don't feel that, I feel that if I work really hard and I put my mind to things, I can create impact. And the last thing I'll say, because I know I really rambled on, I ramble a lot. People actually make fun of me for it, Jacob. But when I was giving a talk, when I was starting to speak at high schools, I remember speaking at a high school of about 6,000 people, and not a lot of people were interested. And I didn't really experience that. Most people were really interested when I talked. And I remember a speaker afterwards came and talked to me, and he was a very, very well seasoned speaker. He goes, Aanikh, you might have, he's like, I have this like 70, 15-15 rule. Is that 70% of people aren't going to give a shit about what you say? Or is it 70-20-10? 70 people aren't going to give a shit about what you say, and that's okay. 20% are going to slightly care, and 10% are going to really care. Hone in on that 10%. And even if that 10% is one person, if you changed that person's world or their perspective, you've changed the world for that person. You've changed the world. And it was a very interesting, esoteric way of saying, like, impact doesn't have to be Airbnb. I don't know if I'm ever going to be Airbnb. Who knows? Probably I would, that would be incredible. I'd be so blessed. But, if I can build a product that even makes one person's life better, that's enough impact. I feel proud of that. So I think I can say with confidence that I can continue to do that at the very, very least.
100%. I think that's a very good lesson for people to take away, is that changing the world can be changing the world for just one person. I like that. And I also say I'm appreciative of your kind words. It means a lot to me. Thank you. My last question. Do we have time for this last question?
Of course.
A little over time.
Of course.
Yeah. So this is the same question I ask everybody at the end of every interview. So I like to flip the script a little bit. Instead of me asking the question, it's you asking the question, but it's not to me. So pretend you have a crystal ball. You can ask this crystal ball any question. You'll get the 100% honest answer. What is one question you want to know the answer to?
Wow. Oh, man, that's really tough. The first thing that came to my mind is like, will surf work? That was the first thing that came to my mind because I have so much just energy and conviction about it. But then I'm like, no, that's too specific. And then I'm like, then I started saying like, will it work? But what is it? And then I started like, well, like, oh, like, am I going to achieve what I want in life? But what do I want to achieve in life? Like, it's tough. I don't know, because it's one of those double-edged swords. Like if I ask, like, will I, be happy at 60? And it's like, no. Is that because that I knew I was going to ask the question and then I changed my life to try to chase happiness? And then that, honestly, Jacob, that's a really, really tough question, man. Honestly, I guess maybe okay, so I'm going to quickly clarify. If I can ask the question and me knowing the answer of the question isn't what creates a bad scenario, it's like I kind of get a free pass. I get a free pass to learn something and I can actually do something about it. The question I would ask is, when I go, do the people that were around me remember me fondly? That would be what I would ask. At the end of the day, if my partner, my friends, my family, my coworkers, the people I interacted with when I was picking up a coffee, if I knew that at the end of my time on earth, that the people that I interacted with had overly had like strong positive conviction about their time and interactions with me, that would be the number one thing in my life I would want to know, because that would be the number one thing in my life I would want to optimize for.
It's a very profound question, a very important question to ask. And I appreciate how much thought you put into the question. You know what I mean? Like, I always enjoy that when people start to think through all of the scenarios, like the butterfly effect that knowing this answer could create. So I really appreciate that, man. But I want to give you the floor now. Where can the people find you? Where can they find Surf, Trufan? Plug anything and everything you got right now.
Switches on my ass because I'm not really big on social media. I read a lot on Twitter, but I don't post a lot. I don't know, Jacob. I don't post a lot. I don't share a lot of my thoughts, and people go, "Why?" I don't know. I don't. Maybe it's the fact that kid was scared to tell people what he thinks and get judged. I don't know what it is. Listen. I'm on Twitter. It's Aanikh. I'm at Aanikh on Instagram, which is really cool. Shout out my friend Henny for being able to help me out with that. Honestly, if you want to connect, just connect with Surf. Right? Join Surf on Instagram. Joinsurf.com. Everything that I will be talking and speaking through will pretty much be done through that. This is my goal is to drive the most success there. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I used to post a lot on LinkedIn. Shout out Swish. Then I got really bad and I stopped. Not shout out me. But yeah, probably honestly, Instagram, I'm going to try to be more active. Twitter, I'm going to be more active. And honestly, if you follow Surf, you'll see updates from me where I'm talking about it and I'm tweeting about it. So those are probably the best places.
Awesome. I'm going to leave people a little bit of like a trailer, a nugget, lay the groundwork for the sequel episode of this podcast, because we'll dive more into this social media thing. Because 3 years ago, you published an article called "Why I Ghosted Social Media for 5 Years and Why it was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made." And so we can start there on the next interview. That'll be a good place.
Lord,
we can pick up there. But no, man, I really appreciate you for taking time to come on the podcast. I had an absolute blast. Already looking forward to the sequel. But yeah, thank you once again, man. And thank you to everybody for listening, whether you listen the entire way through or you only listen to bits and pieces. I really appreciate you taking time to check this out. Everyone do me a favor, go and follow Aanikh and DM him, telling him you want more content from him. Also, make sure you go and join Surf. Again, joinsurf.com. I'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes down below so you can find it. If you'd like to follow me, you can find me everywhere on social media at Jacob Kelly. Feel free to come and say hello. My DMs are always open. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan. Thank you once again for listening. We'll talk soon.